Hello and welcome to Property Question Time. This is the programme where you can have your property related questions answered by our expert panel. I'm Stephen Galpin, and with me today on the panel are Nick Wallwork, CEO of propertyforum.com. Welcome, Nick.
Thank you.
Paul Mahoney, CEO of Nova Financial Group. Welcome, Paul. And Steve Jacob, Chairman of Fabrik Property Group. Hi Steve, how are you?
Hi.
Good. Gentlemen, we're going to move straight on then. Nick, your first question is, prices in London keep rising and rising. I'm a young professional in my 30s, on a career path. Am I going to be better to move out of London and commute in, or should I try and bear the punishment of London prices?
Well, you're right. London's a sort of market in itself, and it certainly rises the fastest in a boom market and falls the quickest in a sort of bear market. Pricing and affordability is pushing first-time buyers out quite a lot, obviously. I think the first-time buyer age is up to late 30s now, isn't it? I'm not sure the exact number, it's 38, 39, which is kind of crazy to be able to afford a property. So moving outside, I'd recommend somewhere like the Thames Valley. You've got Crossrail starting from Reading, I believe next year. It's been delayed, but I think it's actually starting service next year. So you can get right from Reading into central London in sort of 20 minutes. So it's much easier to live outside of London now and commute in, much less commute times, and it's more affordable. Prices are lower. So
yes, I think you've hit the nail on the head. There is specific commuting equipment now being installed. I mean, Crossrail is one. I mean, I remember commuting into London from Henley, which is absolutely great. It's 20 minutes until they say, "Well, I'm sorry, the train isn't running this morning. It leaves on the line or whatever else." And then it's not quite so funny at 6:30 in the morning, is it? You come in from Reading anyway, don't you?
Yeah, I'm based in Reading and Thames Valley. We do a lot of development through that area. And as I say, Crossrail is going to be a game changer. It's already only 20 minutes into Paddington, but then of course you've got to get across into central London. And what Crossrail means, it means you can go straight into central London without changing trains.
I'm just wondering what the price differential percentages is in terms of speed of rising or speed of falling in between perhaps central London and then perhaps the M25 ring. Paul, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, I think there's still some value pockets in London as well, especially if you're buying as your home, and it's not necessarily about serviceability from rent and that sort of thing. If I assume this person's buying for themselves, like East London and South East London, there's still some cheaper places where you're still quite central. I live in Deptford, Zone 2, and significantly cheaper than anywhere else in Zone 2. So that's probably worth considering.
On the fringes of good areas, I think it's the key, because then it'll grow out into your area in the coming years.
I think we both almost live within a mile of this sort of building here, and I mean into the West End, it's 20 minutes at most, isn't it? Which is pretty good. Steve, north of England.
Yeah, it's quite a relatable subject. So I lived in Essex my whole life, met my fiance in Essex, and we moved to the north of the country, and I was pushing to buy a house straight away. And my fiance said, let's rent first, let's see how we get on. And that was a good decision on her part, because after about 12 months, it was apparent, she couldn't do it. She was too far away from her family, and we decided to come home. So for this guy, if he's always lived in London, to move out of London might be a big decision. It might be worth him just renting in an area outside of London, maybe like Thames Gateway or somewhere like that, and just seeing how he gets on.
We've also noticed quite a strong trend toward people that were planning to buy for themselves. Notice they can't buy where they want to live, so they rent where they want to live, central or around central London, and has the facilities and that sort of thing, and investing in the north, for example. Right. So, because the serviceability doesn't work for them buying a home, they can invest the money they have in a buy-to-let and get on the property ladder that way.
And that can go a good way to funding home life, can't it?
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Okay. I have to say I've moved down to London a couple of times, and I miss the big green and the big yellow shop, so I think I have to stay here. Anyway, Paul, in considering my state, I'm seriously thinking about selling my house to my children and renting it back from them until I die. They have mortgages of their own, so could they get a joint buy-to-let mortgage to make this work?
Okay. So there's a few things to consider there. There's a bit of inheritance tax planning, probably needs to be done. That's not my area of specialty, but my understanding is that if that was gifted and they were to pass away within 7 years, it would be subject to inheritance tax, but they should seek advice on that. So far as whether a buy-to-let mortgage would work, a traditional buy-to-let mortgage wouldn't work because it's a family member that's living in the property. There are mortgages available for that purpose, and they're consumer mortgages, and they're still technically buy-to-let, I suppose, but there's more boxes to tick. They'd also have to look at the fact of, the lenders would probably look at this person's children as accidental landlords. So they haven't bought that property for business purposes. They've been given it or inherited it from their father, and therefore there's considerations to have there, and there's other boxes to tick there as well. Because a traditional buy-to-let lender or mortgage, they look at that as you're going into it as a business activity. So it's a commercial mortgage, and therefore it's a lot more flexible than a residential mortgage.
I'm also thinking you'd probably have to be very careful about the rent set, wouldn't you? The temptation would be to give a preferential rent to your children, and that in itself could actually attract a tax liability, couldn't it, if it was...
There'd be tax considerations. There'd also be considerations as to how much you can actually borrow. Because if they're supplementing their father's rent, well, they're only going to be able to borrow to a certain amount based upon that rent. So depending on how much is going to be owed on the property, that might be, a difficulty as well.
Sure. Nick?
Yeah, I think they look at as well, don't they? Essentially, that is almost a second home.
Yeah.
It's in a simple sense of the term. So they've got to be able to afford that as well as their main mortgage. So their current situation, how many properties they own already, they're going to look at a big picture of what their portfolio looks like.
Would that have any, shall we say, council tax implications, anything like that?
Not so far as I'm aware. I think the tenant would just end up paying the council tax as normal.
Okay, good. Steve, have you come across this?
I haven't come across this exact situation, but when going into the buy-to-let market, just consider how heavily regulated it is on the residential side, and if they did go ahead, do the deal and become landlords, make sure they understand the market and go and get themselves a professional property manager who knows all the boxes to tick when onboarding a tenant.
Okay, well, talking about professional property managers, which I know is your subject, how easy is it for a new property portfolio holder to manage their properties? Inheriting one from my late husband looks to be too much for me to handle, and I am unsure about whether I should sell it or whether I should keep it and try and manage it myself.
Well, as I just said, it's a heavily regulated sector. When I first got into property, I didn't realise how many boxes you have to tick. And it's not until you have a bad tenant and you take your case to the court, I mean, literally, there's about 7 or 8 things you need to have, like a gas cert, electric cert, an onboarding pack. And if you don't tick every box, the judge will simply look at the pack and throw it straight out of court in favour of the tenant. And I had a tenant that was in my property for 12 months, not paying rent, and I had to do addendums to the contracts to get things right. So in that instance, go and get a professional property manager, make sure they know how to tick all them boxes, speak to that property manager's existing landlords to make sure that the landlords they've already got are happy with the service. And yeah, it's a big decision to make.
Well, I mean, the question really is about should she keep the property or should she try and manage it? And I think it's the same subject that we have many times on this programme. It's a professional business. It's not a game. You need to be professional, particularly these days. It is heavily legislated.
Yeah, it's not a hobby anymore.
It's not a hobby.
It's not a hobby. No, it's definitely. I mean, the terminology passive income is a bit used a bit ad hoc. It's not passive. It is a business.
Gentlemen, thank you very much for that. That's all we've got time for in this half of the programme. So we're going to take a short break now. Don't go away. Join us after the break. Thank you.
My name is John Howard, and I've been investing and developing properties for over 40 years. In that time, I've been very successful, but of course I've always made the odd mistake as well. In my book, I explain how to be successful and what to do should something go wrong. I've survived 3 property recessions. I can help you do the same. My book is available online. Please go to johnhowardpropertyexpert.co.uk.
The tax system has evolved significantly over recent years for property investors and developers. You may think that you and your accountant have a grip on these changes. However, unless you're receiving specialist tax advice from a specialist tax advisory firm, then it's unlikely to be the case. At ETC Tax, our team of highly experienced chartered tax advisors work with private individuals and companies to deliver effective tax planning whilst meeting HMRC compliance requirements. Let us help you to meet your personal or commercial objectives in the most tax-efficient manner. ETC Tax, making the complex simple. The antiquated village of La Roche-Beaucourt in rural Dordogne may not have the cachet of Paris or London, yet it houses one of the 10 fastest growing property consultancies in Europe. It is home to Leggett Immobilier, the leading international estate agent in France. They have around 16,000 properties for sale right across the country, with a network of 400 agents who provide local expertise and market knowledge. If you want to know the best villages, schools, restaurants or boulangeries, then the Leggett team will know the answer. As well as advising buyers on the local market and regional property prices, they also have a bilingual contract team who ensure that your purchase will go through as smoothly as possible. Leggett has been voted Best Estate Agent in France for the past 4 years running. To experience these exceptional service levels for yourself, then head to our website, leggettfrance.com.
Property is a great investment option, but it's one of the largest purchases that you'll ever make. As individuals, we're all limited by our resources, and regardless of our experience, knowledge or time, we can achieve much more with the help of a qualified team and extra resources being available. Nova Financial specialize in assisting clients to achieve financial freedom through property investment. With over 100 years of experience, we shape your family's future. To invest in property with absolute confidence, call us on 0203 8600 or visit nova.financial. Meet the Author is a brand new mini-series involving leading experts in the property industry, including mentors, developers, property lawyers, and other industry experts who share insightful stories about their journey and their books. Each book is compiled by authors with years of valuable experience, tips, and observations, providing you with new knowledge about the property industry. To find out more, visit the website property-tv.co.uk/library.
Welcome back to Property Question Time Part 2. I'm Stephen Galpin, and with me are Paul Mahoney, Steve Jacob and Nick Wallwork. Nick, you're first in the second half. Can we really expect house prices to increase after we have fully Brexited, or should we remain sceptical?
Well, I think we've all had enough of Brexit and we'd like a decision, and every day changes. But
that's not answering the question.
No, like a true politician, I avoid the question.
Yeah.
No, I think there is some pent-up demand with people that have been holding off in the short term, waiting to see if the market's going to bottom out at all with Brexit. I don't think we're seeing a huge downward shift in prices. A little bit more in London as well. But I think that's the uncertainty, and once that passes and there's a decision either way, I personally believe we'll see a nice bit of market movement and some more transactions in the short to medium term.
I mean, interestingly enough, on Property TV, we've had the opportunity to interview one or two of the very top agents, and their view is that there will certainly be a Brexit bounce after everything is settled. But we're not experiencing the sort of drops that, for instance, the Bank of England predicted, are we?
No, I
mean, we've got a stagnation in the market at the moment.
However, that comment was taken completely out of context. When Mark Carney spoke about the market potentially falling by 30%, he wasn't necessarily saying that. He was saying that the banks needed to be prepared for if that were to happen.
Yes.
He wasn't saying that was going to happen, and that's something we discussed on the panel yesterday. So I think that was twisted by the media, and he was probably well aware that it was going to be.
I'm sure.
But yeah, I agree. The property market is very simply all about supply and demand, and demand in all the major cities of the UK is significantly outweighing supply, and it has done for decades. So if you're buying in the right areas and the right properties, regardless of short-term economic and political blips, you're going to do pretty well.
Yeah. Steve, I mean, we're a little bit London-centric in our view of things, so give us the northern perspective on that.
Well, I see a number of property valuations get done, and every single valuation we're getting come through at the moment has a mention of Brexit and has been downvalued. The actual way I value a property hasn't changed in the slightest. But I think the uncertainty is causing valuers to be a little bit more sceptical and create them down valuation situations. So just, if you're buying a property at the moment, just be aware it probably will mention it in the valuation and you might be a little bit cheesed off.
But interestingly enough, I think if I remember my training properly, that, you know, for instance, Red Book valuations shouldn't be valuing on the basis of what might happen in the future. They should be based on valuations as of now, should they not?
They're a law unto themselves, though, aren't they?
And the way I calculate the value of a property hasn't changed in the slightest, but it has caused me that little bit of aggravation. Again, though, it can also be used as a tool to renegotiate your property if it is downvalued.
You know, I think you know, surveyors have got to protect their PI cover. You know, there's no incentive for them to value something high ever. And valuing at the moment in what is a unique black swan event, we'll call it, you know, we're the week of potential Brexit. If you're getting something valued, I had something downvalued yesterday by 30%, and it was a cheap property.
Wow.
Absolute madness. So I think it's just massively being careful.
Well, I think we could probably do a whole programme, and probably Paul would contribute an awful lot to this in terms of valuations for their
Bane of my
clients.
existence.
The whole discussion.
but there we are. Well, let's move on. Paul, to your question. If a company is set up to buy and rent out properties, does it get taxed like any other company? How do we handle the rising value of the properties as an asset on the books each year? Now, I just qualify that. I think we should probably sort of just put in for the viewer's benefit, how do we handle the either rise or fall of the values in our accounts? Because both could be useful.
Yeah. Okay. So the first point, so far as tax, the answer is yes, it does get taxed in a very similar way to other businesses. There are different types of businesses, of course, though. There's trading businesses and investment businesses, and that's mostly to do with inheritance tax. So it's worth understanding that and how that might affect your estate and how it might be passed on. And also how your personal taxes and things, and how the business is treated for tax purposes. The difference really is an investment business is you take some cash, you buy something quite passive, and you just let it sit there. A trading business is when you're actually working in the business, and that can have different tax ramifications. From the perspective of valuing properties, I think this is a bit of a grey area on a yearly, the yearly basis for the accounts. Certainly in my experience, I haven't had valuations done every single year. It's been more of a guesstimate, but I believe, some others do. So, I don't think there's, as all tax things, there's always a bit of a grey area as far as what you have to and don't have to do, because HMRC never tells us anything in black and white. But, make sure you're doing the right thing and, accounting for the values properly, I suppose.
Okay. Anything to add, Nick?
I think it helps your balance sheet to show a slightly increasing balance sheet. So revaluing your properties, even if it is a guesstimate, and looking at the local market, getting it right is important. So you've got an understanding of where your portfolio is at and how you're leveraged. So I think it's important to do, whether it's informally or more formally.
I mean, that information is readily available these days. You can go to the property portals and you can get local statistics for the property values in your particular area. Do you come across this, Steve?
Yeah, so every year, well, not necessarily every year, I want to give my bank, because I class the bank as my business partner, I want to give the bank the most accurate valuation I can. So I'll just go, there's a local valuer I know in the town, and literally for a few £100, he'll just revalue all the stock. And if there's not been a change, he probably won't charge me as much. But I just give that to my bank manager and give it to my account, and it just gets revalued on the books.
I think, as far as I've always experienced, I think as long as revenue see that you're taking a realistic view of your assets, I mean, I think that's all that can be expected of you, really. I don't think, especially for small companies, and perhaps I'm thinking buy-to-let owners that are bought in a limited company, I don't think revenue would expect them to have Red Book valuations done each year at £1,000 or £2,000 a time. So, yeah. Okay, gents, thank you very much. Steve, you better sit still for this one. It's quite a long one. I live in an apartment block in central Manchester. The development is now 10 years old and the service charge has been to date quite reasonable. However, recently the freeholder has decided that huge refurbishment works should be undertaken, and I'm presuming that this is in the interests of enhancing his freehold investment value. While I understand that the blocks should be well maintained, these works would seem excessive. Proper notices have been served on residents announcing the commissioning of these works. Is there anything we can do to moderate the scope of these works? The freeholder is refusing to engage and simply says we should take legal action if we feel so strongly that these works should not take place. However, it seems that the odds are stacked against us, as he is able to reclaim his legal costs on our service charge. So there's three parts to that, really, aren't there?
Yeah, well, it's quite a sad situation to be in. This is the type of stuff that does give developers a bad name, and it's not nice to hear. Firstly, he should have served a Section 20 notice.
I'm presuming that's where he refers to notices.
Yeah. So he's probably playing his side of the game as straight as he can. I would definitely advise to get a property litigator involved. It might not cost as much as you think, and if a group of you can get together and pay for that advice, if a property litigator notices there's a blatant act of unfairness, they will tell you that, and if you win, he has to pay your legal fees. There was a situation where a friend of mine was a nightclub owner. He had the lease on a property, and the freeholder come in and doubled his rent. And he came to me for some advice, and I told him to go to a property litigator and a surveyor, and the rent went up, as it should do with a rent review, but nowhere near as much as double, and that advice saved the nightclub owner a lot of money. So, seeking professional advice in that situation is very important.
Okay. I think there's a fundamental point there that I don't think a landlord is really in any position to take the building past the specification that it was. So if it's an excess in terms of specification or anything, I think you might have a fair argument to restrict the works that are going on. I mean, freeholders these days, with the multiples that are being achieved on freehold sales, of course they're very conscious of getting the high value for a freehold sale, much more so than they were 10 years ago even.
100%, yeah. I mean, it's like a multiple of about 30, 35 sometimes.
30, 32 here, quite regularly achieved, yeah.
So they're going to try and push them values where they can.
Okay, Paul, any financial slant on that?
Not really, I don't think, no.
Are you able to finance freeholds if you wanted to go out and invest in freeholds?
Well, something to consider with freeholds, and I actually just had a conversation about this before the show. A client that's looking at buying a block of 10 flats and the freehold. It seems sensible that if you're buying a block, you'd also buy the freehold. Lenders don't like lending on buy-to-let apartments where you also own the freehold, because essentially you've got the rights to both sides. So they prefer that if you're buying a buy-to-let, that somebody else owns the freehold. But one way around that is to buy the freehold in a company and buy the flats in your own name, or vice versa. And although you've got control of both, for some silly reason, lenders prefer it.
Well, I think that's quite interesting. I think we're going to see the birth of an explosion, in fact, of companies that are set up purely to own freeholds nowadays. Ground rents are no longer peppercorn, they're often perhaps even £1,000 a year, so become quite substantial assets. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your expertise. Nick Wallwork, thank you very much for joining us today. Paul Mahoney, thank you. And Steve Jacob, thank you for coming down from the north of England to join us. You've been very welcome, and thank you for your input. That's all we've got time for today. Join us next time on Property Question Time.
If you have any questions that you would like to send to any of our experts at Property Question Time, you can submit them via our website, on social media, or email us at info@propertytelevision.co.uk.
My name is John Howard, and I've been investing and developing properties for over 40 years. In that time, I've been very successful, but of course I've always made the odd mistake as well. In my book, I explain how to be successful and what to do should something go wrong. I've survived 3 property recessions. I can help you do the same. My book is available online. Please go to johnhowardpropertyexpert.co.uk.
The tax system has evolved significantly over recent years for property investors and developers. You may think that you and your accountant have a grip on these changes. However, unless you're receiving specialist tax advice from a specialist tax advisory firm, then it's unlikely to be the case. At ETC Tax, our team of highly experienced chartered tax advisors work with private individuals and companies to deliver effective tax planning whilst meeting HMRC compliance requirements. Let us help you to meet your personal or commercial objectives in the most tax-efficient manner. ETC Tax, making the complex simple.
The antiquated village of La Roche-Beaucourt in rural Dordogne may not have the cachet of Paris or London, yet it houses one of the 10 fastest growing property consultancies in Europe. It is home to Leggett Immobilier, the leading international estate agent in France. They have around 16,000 properties for sale right across the country, with a network of 400 agents who provide local expertise and market knowledge. If you want to know the best villages, schools, restaurants or boulangeries, then the Leggett team will know the answer. As well as advising buyers on the local market and regional property prices, they also have a bilingual contracts team who ensure that your purchase will go through as smoothly as possible. Leggett has been voted Best Estate Agent in France for the past 4 years running. To experience these exceptional service levels for yourself, then head to our website, leggettfrance.com.
Property is a great investment option, but it's one of the largest purchases that you'll ever make. As individuals, we're all limited by our resources, and regardless of our experience, knowledge or time, we can achieve much more with the help of a qualified team and extra resources being available. Nova Financial specialize in assisting clients to achieve financial freedom through property investment. With over 100 years of experience, we shape your family's future. To invest in property with absolute confidence, call us on 0203 8600 or visit nova.financial. Meet the Author is a brand new mini-series involving leading experts in the property industry, including mentors, developers, property lawyers, and other industry experts who share insightful stories about their journey and their books. Each book is compiled by authors with years of valuable experience, tips, and observations, providing you with new knowledge about the property industry. To find out more, visit the website property-tv.co.uk/library.
If you've got a question about property, why not ask an expert? Property Question Time gives you the opportunity to ask anything you want, whether it's about planning, finance, conveyancing, moving abroad, literally anything that's property related. The Property TV panel of experts are available to answer your questions no matter how complex they may seem. Simply email your question to info@propertytelevision.tv and join us on Sky Channel 189 to hear your questions answered.